This is Duke University.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And welcome to our luncheon. I am Eric Toon. And I'm the director of Duke's Innovation and Entrepreneurship Initiative. Today is the tail end of our first Innovation and Entrepreneurship Week here at Duke, the culmination of a whole series of events that are designed to bring the capabilities of the initiative to the entire university. The Duke Innovation and Entrepreneurship Initiative is really designed to help take the ideas that grow at the university and help people turn them into real things and real actions that make a real difference to real people's lives. When you drill all the way down to the bottom of the initiative, why does Duke have this initiative? That's why we're here, to help make the ideas that grow at the university matter, to really impact people's lives. The initiative is built out around 4 themes: education, from undergraduates to alumni and everything in between; fundamental research in entrepreneurship; translation, giving the university community the tools that they actually need to turn their ideas into actions; and social entrepreneurship, a space that we have sort of a special soft spot for. We want to make sure that all of the ideas that grow at the university have the impact that they can. We know now that our undergraduate and graduate bodies are very close to half women and half men. We're working hard to increase the number of women on our faculty. We have many women faculty here, successful and accomplished people. But we know too that if we look at the venture community and how ideas move out of the university into the big wide world, that women-led efforts are very badly underrepresented. And so finding ways to make sure that women have the same opportunities that men do to take their ideas and to do things with them is something that's very near and dear to our hearts. And so today, towards the end of our Innovation and Entrepreneurship Week, we have a very distinguished panel that's here to talk about exactly those issues. And leading that panel will be Kimberly Jenkins. Kimberly, of course, is an entrepreneur, a former board member, a Duke grad, and actually started the Entrepreneurship Initiative back in 2010 while I wasn't even at Duke. And so much of what we see around us today is very much on Kimberly. So I think that what we're going to do is give people a few minutes to get started on their lunch, and then Kimberly will start the panel. So thanks very much for being here today, and I hope you all enjoy yourselves.
I'm going to pull a fast one on you, Eric, and actually let's just get started, because I know that so many of you have questions, and the panel has stressed that they would like to hear your stories, get your input, and definitely hear your questions. So for the sake of time, I'm going to kick this off. We put together bios of all of our panelists, and I encourage you to read those. I'm not going to use the time to walk you through all of that, but I did want to make a few personal remarks, if I could. First of all, it has been a privilege to be a part of the creation and launch of the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Initiative. Many of the people you see up here have been instrumental in that as well. And I wanted to say that it's now in very capable hands with Eric Toon, and also acknowledge the President Broadhead is a champion of this initiative, and the university has made it one of the 5 pillars of the Duke Forward campaign. So we've come a long way from a couple years ago when this first kicked off. Let me first turn to Melissa Bernstein on my left. And as it says in the document you have in front of you, she is the co-founder and co-CEO of Melissa & Doug, which is a leading designer and manufacturer of educational toys. When I get asked about my work in innovation and entrepreneurship, I'm often asked to tell stories about the entrepreneurs that I get to work with. And I can rattle off the names of biotech, med device, infotech, entrepreneurs, and people nod knowingly and enthusiastically. But when I say Melissa Bernstein of Melissa & Doug, everybody lights up. And I'm talking women and men alike, because they know the brand and they know the quality of the products that this company makes. What you may not know is that Melissa has also given back to Duke in extraordinary ways. I had an opportunity to meet Melissa at her home very, very early, in the early days of the initiative. And I walked into her house, and she let me first pick from a group of toys. So I have now become a heroine to my favorite preschooler by sharing that toy. But then she sat me down and gave me a list of all the courses that she had gone through the whole Duke curriculum and pulled out a list of the courses that had anything to do with entrepreneurship. And she said, "This isn't enough. You need to do better." And she really, really influenced. So one of the biggest ways Melissa has given back to this university is advocated for our undergraduates in particular and the importance of education. She and her husband, Doug, have founded a program that is, again, very influential for our students. It's called Melissa and Doug Entrepreneurs.
I don't want to go after her.
I know. Okay, then I'm going to skip you.
Okay, good.
And
I don't want to go next.
I'm going to go to Kathy Amato. Kathy is one of the people that is making Melissa's encouragement for courses at Duke a reality. Kathy is an entrepreneur herself, and in the publishing world, which I know you'll hear some stories about. And she is also very entrepreneurial and innovative in the academic setting, both at Fuqua, the School of Business, and now in the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Initiative. So she is making sure that our students get the certificate, the courses, the internships, and the resources they need to become the next generation of great entrepreneurs. Let's see who I'll pick on next. Rachel, I'm coming back to you. Rachel, sitting next to Melissa. I know Rachel from her time as co-founder and leader of Sempre Laboratories. It's a venture-backed company that focuses on developing and marketing women's sexual health products. So you might know that I was really surprised and excited when Rachel introduced herself to me as a leading vagipreneur. I will let her tell you what that means, but what you may not know about Rachel, and it isn't on that write-up, is that when we first launched the initiative, we had a task force. This was an extremely hard-working task force, and Rachel co-chaired the curriculum committee that, along with Melissa and others, really put the spotlight on the need, again, to educate our students at Duke. She has since become a very good friend and a colleague, someone I call when I need business and life advice. Christy, I promised that she definitely needed to be included when she wrote an email and said, "You know I'm not a Duke alum." and she's an extraordinarily successful, seasoned entrepreneur in the biotech space and is now a venture capitalist. Her real claim to fame is that she also is a leader at UNC, so she favors the light blue. They have an extremely progressive innovation and entrepreneurship initiative there, and I had the pleasure of working with Christy on their task force or their innovation circle. So she's a good friend as well, and she's a good friend to Duke, I might add. Tatiana. Saving the best for last here. Tatiana is a recent Duke graduate, and she is already making waves as an entrepreneur in the healthy energy drink arena. This is something she started in her dorm room. That dorm room was in our selective living group called InCube. InCube is focused on entrepreneurship, and it was basically a group of men and Tatiana. I often, given the notoriety of Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg, students often ask me, how can I launch my endeavor from my dorm room? And I usually discourage it because I say, you know, there are exceptions like all those guys, but it's hard to go straight from your dorm room into a billion-dollar business. Tatiana is proving me wrong. She is a force, and I'm really glad you're here to help give perspective on what young entrepreneurs are dealing with these days. So at this point, I'd like to launch into our questions. These are questions that the whole group put together. And we base these on questions we're often asked from women in entrepreneurship and from Duke faculty, staff, and students. Because we want to save time for you, I am asking all of them to give you their stories, their lessons learned, perhaps some of their failures and mistakes and how they recovered. But I'm going to selectively ask all of you questions. We have about 5 or 6, and then we'll open it up to you. All right, Melissa and Tatiana, I'm starting with you. Please tell us how you got started as an entrepreneur. What initially drove you to become an entrepreneur?
Okay, well, at risk at seeming too deep, too early, you know, I humbly believe that the goal in life for all of us should be to find your passion, and when found, sort of embark on the road to doing it every moment of every day that you can. And if you are fortunate enough that your passion and your vocation can converge, then you will pretty certainly have a great life. But as many women experience, and I was certainly one of these, my entire life up to being an entrepreneur was about sort of denying who I was, pleasing, and doing things to make others happy. So very early on, I determined that I was going to be a lawyer because it made my dad really happy. And no reason other than that, and when I said it, he got really proud and beamed. So, you know, interned at law offices from about 13 on, was a public policy studies major at Duke. Then I decided international law and became fluent in Japanese, and was on the road to taking my LSAT and applying to law school. But interestingly, as I started to go more to the law library and talk with law students and sort of understand what law school was about, deep inside, although I didn't speak about it, I was starting to have my doubts, because in reality, I was really a wacky, introverted, deep, introspective creative who had always created, but out of sort of out of sorrow, not out of joy. So I was feeling these doubts, but not expressing them, and having suddenly sleepless nights where I wasn't sleeping all night, and stress and tension, not really understanding why. Anyway, day comes for the LSAT, go into the test, sit down to take the test, look at the test, and I don't see anything but a blank piece of paper. And for about an hour, I stared at that blank piece of paper with a pencil poised, not able to answer a question. So I ended up standing up after about an hour, giving my test to the proctor, having to void it, and walking out realizing that, oh my gosh, here it was the spring of my senior year, and I wasn't going to be going to law school. So then, right, light bulb moment, you're a creative, you've always created your whole life, you're gonna embark on your passion. Nope. I decided I was going to apply for a job, and of all things, even though I was a writer and a musician and a creative, I decided to become an investment banker. And those were the days when investment banking was really hot. Michael Milken, Drexel Burnham Lambert, you're all too young to know those names. But, and I was, for whatever reason, sought after by these investment banks and took a job with Morgan Stanley as an investment banker. Well, then reality really hit, because the pressure of being an investment banker was almost too much to bear. Because some people, numbers are magic to them, and they can see numbers and make magic happen. For me, magic was in tangible products, in notes, in words, and it was like I had a 2,000-pound gorilla on my shoulders from morning till night. I could barely breathe. I felt so much stress there, and almost thought about, like, what is life for? You know, I felt like I wasn't pursuing a passion. In my mind, I wasn't doing anything that to me had value, although to many it's great value. But to me personally, I didn't feel I was giving back and knew I had to get off the path or I would shrivel up and wither away. My boyfriend at the time, Doug, was on a similar path. He was in advertising with similar thoughts, and we said, you know what, we don't care, life's too short, we have to, though we were only 22 and 24, but we said we have to do our own thing, and we had such a passion toward children, having 3 of our 4 parents in education. We said we don't care about the money, we don't care about anything except really doing something that we feel matters and feeling whole every day. So we quit our jobs and started our company in 1988.
That's a story. Tatiana.
Yeah, so I'm going to step back to when I was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, and I would just devour Forbes magazine articles, Inc. magazine articles, and just the stories about stories about these people running companies that were growing and making things were really inspiring to me. And I later found out that word is called entrepreneur, is the person who does that stuff. And so I thought, oh, that's who I want to be. My family at dinner tables, my grandparents come from a long line of business people, and I would just eavesdrop and ask questions. By the time I was 12, those questions kind of became expected, and I wasn't shushed anymore. So jump forward to high school. At my high school, if you were smart and driven and going to become somebody in the real world, then you studied math and science. Thankfully for me, I actually had a big interest in math, science, biology, and so I started pursuing engineering. I came to Duke to study BME, quickly changed to mechanical engineering. I did an internship at Procter & Gamble, designing the next generation sustainable diaper, and that's where I found my passion for consumer products, really good consumer products that are good for the environment, good for us as consumers, that we can feel good about using. Around that time, my mom had taken a job at Microsoft, specifically because it was the most stable job that she could get and virtually guaranteed to not be laid off with fabulous benefits, et cetera. This is fall of 2008. At the same time, I had just spent 2 summers working in Iceland. I'm half Icelandic, half Venezuelan. The economy in Iceland was booming, and so with the exchange rate, the first summer I made $17 the hour. The second summer I made $22, $23 an hour. Worked 70, 80-hour weeks, didn't take any weekends off, and I put all of it in a high-interest savings account in Iceland. 14% interest savings account, and I didn't believe it. I knew my Bank of America account was making less than 1%, like way less. Like I could see like little cents adding up in Bank of America, so how could 14% be real? 7 years back, the average was about 8.5% saving on a savings account that you can pull out at any time, not even a CD, so I was like, yes. I did ask them though, what happens if the bank goes under? And my stepmom kind of just like shoved at me, and she's like, that's rude. And she was, but the banker told me, well, the money's guaranteed by the Icelandic government, so even if that were to happen, which is not, your money's fine. Well, October 2008, here I am, a freshman at Southgate, sitting in my dorm watching between presidential elections, the economy tanking, and one day the news about Iceland comes on. All of the banks have been nationalized, and foreigners have lost all of their money. I call up my dad those 2 summers of all of my savings account money, and I said, what about my money? And he's like, your money? Talk about the rest of the country's money. Kind of felt a little bit bad, but my money was still there in kroner. It just meant that instead of being $12,000, it was about $2,000 that I could. And I wasn't even allowed to take that money out at that point because the government had kind of checked in and wasn't selling dollars anymore. I was pretty lucky, though. Money was technically still there. So between those 2 things and my mom losing her job at Microsoft within 4 months of me losing all of my savings, I kind of saw these 2 giant situations come crumbling down on me at a very formative time in my life, and I realized, to me, my analysis was, I can't rely on somebody else to give me a job, on somebody else to provide for me. I need to try to do that myself. I need to make sure that I study something where I can create value, whether it's for somebody else, and if that company doesn't work out, then I'm still valuable and I can easily get another job. Or better yet, rely on myself. So I came back to Duke after my internship at Procter & Gamble, and I said, I don't want to work for a big Fortune 50 company that takes 10 years to bring innovation to the consumer. I want to work for a smaller company where I have a bigger say. Maybe I'll start with this new entrepreneurship thing that's starting. InCube was really helped start by Melissa, actually. So I met Melissa before I even came up with the idea for Mati, before I even started working on it. I'll talk a little bit about that relationship and our mentorship later on. And so I was doing InCube. I was one of the only girls. I had basically just been told, you know, anybody interested in entrepreneurship, come on over. You're a girl. You want to start a company at some point. Doesn't matter if it's when you're 40. Just come on, join us. Come back from the summer, and all the guys are starting companies. I'm the only one that's not starting a company. So I was trying to come up with ideas, and it's like telling somebody to come up with an idea right there on the spot. It's just not going to happen. But I'd been brewing brewing cups of tea for a while as a healthy source of caffeine, and it got to the point where I was brewing 3 or 4 cups every day. And I just decided, you know, that's too many cups a day of brewing individually. Let me make a pot full of it, throw it in the fridge so it doesn't go bad over the next couple days. And that's how I'll get my caffeine. So friends started coming over. It was working. They really liked the tea, and somebody said, well, you're an InCube. What are you doing? You've got your recipe right here. Just buy some glass bottles, throw it on a shelf at Whole Foods, and you know, when the pot's too small, buy a new one, bigger one. So a couple bigger pots later, we're now 310-gallon pots back-to-back brewing. This week yielded 620 gallons of product. Not bottles anymore. Cans turn out to be a little bit more cost-effective and environmentally friendly. We'll be in 30 Whole Foods stores starting in a week and a half. So definitely moving right along, one big pot after the next.
She is going to be the next Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, energy drinks. Okay, so there's been a lot in the news lately, a lot of media attention around the lack of women in entrepreneurship, and there are challenges, and we are going to get to that topic, but I wanted us to focus right now on the advantages that women have as entrepreneurs and as team builders. And I'd like to ask both Christy and Kathy if you would speak to the topic of how being a woman has helped you grow your business.
Okay. Christy has ceded the floor to me, so I will take it. And as Kimberly said, when you look at studies now about entrepreneurship and the skills that are required to be an effective entrepreneur, women actually have the advantage, because so many of the things that are naturally true of women and the nature of being female lend themselves to entrepreneurship. And I would really encourage you to go and look at those studies. I'm going to touch on a couple of the points very quickly, and then I'm going to share a story with you that illustrates the point. But entrepreneurs need to be very good listeners. The whole heart of being a good innovator is being able to listen and hear and understand what people need, and then being able to meet that need. And any of you who've taken any of the great entrepreneurship classes that we do now have at Duke University, you know that's where the classes always start. It's with the customer focus and what does the customer need. And women naturally are very good at getting that focus. When you meet someone, you want to hear about them. You want to learn about what their issues are. You're naturally empathetic. It just comes with being female. Women also are very good at sharing. And entrepreneurship is a team sport. Everyone up here will tell you that a large part of their success has come from the network they've been able to surround themselves with and the support they've had from people who can just work across the disciplines. Women also approach problems from a very holistic point of view, where you're looking at everything. You're not just trying to decide, okay, there's one sliver of this that we need to try to figure out how to solve, and we'll deal with it from that regard. You look at the entire issue, and you holistically try to figure out how to move it forward. I don't want to belabor the points of the literature that you can go and read and learn for yourself, so now I want to try to bring this to life for you with a story from my past. As Kimberly said, I have started 2 publishing companies over the course of my career, And I'm going to date myself with my first story because my first publishing company I started 20 years ago, actually over 20 years ago. And 20 years ago, if you wanted to be a successful publisher, there were 3 things that were true. You had to be selling to major bookstores. Barnes & Noble and Borders still really mattered, and they mattered in a major way. You had to have a really strong connection with them, because if you didn't, the rest of the publishing world was not going to take you very seriously. The people then who worked for these stores had incredible control over who was a successful publisher and who wasn't. Because if they didn't like what you were offering, just with, one answer, they could put an end to your dreams of being a publisher. And then the final point, which is going to seem so incredibly quaint, is over 20 years ago, being able to speak to someone on the phone still mattered. Email, text messaging, all those ways of communication that we use now didn't really matter. Well, when I started my publishing company, I had a list of really good titles, some artists, some writers that I was going to represent. They had really meaningful work. They had beautiful work. Every man that I spoke with said, you can just kiss this idea goodbye, because you are never going to be able to get to the man in New York who is going to determine your future, because he is not going to talk to a new woman, upstart publisher. So I quit talking to men. I started talking to women. And I talked to all of my friends who were in New York. And I said, one of you has to know the man at Barnes & Noble who buys for my category. Tell me who he is. And I got the name, and I even got the phone number. One of my male friends heard that I'd done that, and he said, you can still kiss it goodbye. He doesn't answer his phone. His office is stacked to the ceiling with, new offerings from new publishers. He never even opens those boxes. So I called the number, and I got his assistant, who was a lovely woman. I asked to speak with him. She said, he doesn't take cold calls. I'm really sorry. And I said, well, thank you very much. The next day, I called back again, had another lovely conversation with her. After a week, we were friends. And I said, Rachel, do you mind if I call you every single day? And she said, no, not at all. And she said, but if you're smart, you'll call me at different times of day. Sometimes call in the morning, sometimes call at lunchtime, sometimes call late in the day. So I did that, and Rachel and I would have lovely conversations. One day, a man answered the phone. It wasn't Rachel. I had him on the line. I explained to him who I was, what my interest was, and because I knew Rachel so well, I knew that I needed to be really quick to the point, because she said, if he ever answers the phone, Kathy, you've got to bottom line it. So I bottom lined it, explained who I was, what my interest was, and he said, I never represent new publishers. And I said, I understand that, and I went into my sales pitch, and it was exactly what Rachel had told me to say. So at the end of it, he said, I really like you, I wish I could support you, but I just am not interested in new publishers. And then he said, but just out of curiosity, what did you send in? And I told him, and there was this long pause. And he said, every week I open one box just to see what's in it. And I opened your box. And he said, I actually love your stuff. And he said, not only do I want to represent it, but there's one item in it that I wanted exclusive on. And once again, because of Rachel, I knew to say, she said, if you ever talk to him and he wants to deal with you, deal back. And I said, oh, that would be wonderful, I would love it. But if you get an exclusive on that, you have to take my entire line. So it took everything I knew about sharing, being patient, being persistent, listening. If I had not listened to Rachel, if I had not gotten to know her, none of this would have happened for me. And those are all skills that come with being female. So we've got a real leg up, ladies.
Well, I agree with everything you said, Kathy. Being persistent and tenacious is part of what I think women do very well, and I think all of us tend to multitask very well because we simply have to in our daily lives, and we're very good at doing that. I want to start with kind of a different kind of story, which is when I took the company public in 2000, There were even fewer women entrepreneurs at that point in biotech and fewer women leaders. And we started the roadshow in Germany. And one of my first meetings when we arrived, I was with, of course, all men, bankers. They were all men. And my chief business officer was male. I had gone into the restroom before he was to arrive. And when I came out, he was talking to all of the bankers and my CBO. He was about 6'7". I'm about 5'1" on a good day. And I walked out, and my chief business officer said, "And this is Dr. Christy Schaefer, our CEO." And he looked down at me and said, "We don't do that here in Germany." Meaning, we don't have women CEOs. So I'd love to talk to him today and see how he gets along with Chancellor Merkel. But the long story short is I had sort of two ways to deal with it, and I decided to just simply say, well, we do that in the United States. I'm here to tell you our story. We're meeting with a number of other people in Frankfurt. If you'd like us to leave, we can, or if you'd like to hear our story, I'm happy to stay. So he allowed us to come in. And within about 5 minutes of me talking about the science and going toe-to-toe with him, he decided I was okay. And so he made an investment in the company. But I think that's an example of what things were like in 2000. I think things have dramatically improved since then. But one of the things that I think that women do really well is the listening. And I think also creating a nurturing environment. I can't talk enough about how important it is to create a corporate culture where people want to work. How many of you are working someplace that you just love? You love getting up every morning and you're really excited.
All the Duke people.
All the people at Duke, right? Okay, how many of you have ever worked for someplace or somebody that really was not a positive experience? It really made you feel really bad, right? And so I had the privilege of working for Burroughs Wellcome, my first job out of a postdoc, and there was a culture there that was very family-oriented. And I borrowed a lot of those ideas, and I watched a lot of leaders, both male and female. So when I was honored to become a CEO of a company, I made sure we had a lot of things in place that made it family-friendly, that made it a place where we had very, very low turnover, less than 3% turnover. We were able to recruit easily from all over the country. And because of that, we were named Best Place to Work in North Carolina, Best Place to Work for Scientists in the nation, Best Place to Work in RTP. And people really loved working there because we cared about them. We showed that we cared about them. And they became very hard workers, and it became a great place to work. So I think women tend to focus a bit more on those type of cultural aspects. And I have one other little story that now that I'm in venture capital, it's even more ironic. But when I was an early CEO and was with a venture-backed company, I had a performance review, and there were two venture capitalists that were on the committee, and there was one former industry person who was a fantastic mentor to me, Leigh Thompson, who was the former CSO of Lilly. And he asked me the question, do you do anything in the community? What do you do? We did so much for Indianapolis at Lilly. What are you doing? And I rattled off about 20 things that we had sponsored, almost everything from the North Carolina Museum of Art to the North Carolina School of Science and Math, et cetera, et cetera. And I was on a couple of nonprofit boards as well. And Leigh said, that is just fantastic. And the venture guy said, how much is that costing us? And my point to them was that we can recruit and retain people because we are doing things in the community that matter to everybody that works for us and with us. And it made a huge difference. We had a room that had a lot of things on the walls that demonstrated we supported the North Carolina Ballet, the symphony, many, many things. And I once had someone come into that room as a visitor, and he said, oh, you must love the ballet, you must love the symphony, you must love this, you must love that. And I said, it's not about what I like. These are suggestions by our employees about what things in the community to support. And this is a collection of all those things. It's not about me. And I found it very easy to give because most of the time the employees were asking for a pretty small amount of money to support something. And that paid off hugely in dividends of getting the kind of loyalty and dedication that we did with our employees. So I'm sure men do that as well. But I will say that I think what I've observed is that women, it really makes a difference. And at Hatteras, I'm called the mama. And some of you know Clay Thorpe, and what he says often is, when mama's not happy, nobody's happy.
I've used that line with my kids. On to the challenges, Rachel. Can you talk a bit about the challenges you've faced and what your take is on why there aren't more women in the field of entrepreneurship these days?
How much time do I have? Okay, so to get your pens out, the reason that there aren't more women entrepreneurs is because it's really hard to build a company, man, woman, or chimpanzee. It's hard work, and one of the things that, Melissa and I have kids in college, their expectations are that everybody's going to be a Steve Jobs or everybody's going to be a Bill Gates. And in our generation, Tatiana referred to, someone who was 40 as something in the very distant future. Unfortunately, it's in my rearview mirror at this point. But we didn't grow up with role models like that. We grew up with Jack Welch. We grew up with people who worked their way up in companies to positions of leadership. It was not even in our frame of reference, and the royal we, that you would consider dropping out of school. And the only thing I started in my room maybe was like a pillow fight or something. I certainly had no intention of starting a business. And I think one of the reasons, there are lots of reasons, and we could spend a whole day on this, which I won't. A couple of reasons. I think one is, in the old days, the model was, you work harder than everybody else, and you do a great job, and you will succeed. Turns out, when you get into, at least I come from business environments, that's not always true. There are forces at work that you don't see. There are unspoken cultural nuances. There are meetings that happen that you're not in, whether because they're in the men's room. I thought you were going to say, we don't do that. And I said, you don't go to the bathroom in Germany? And one of the things that's so great for me about being part of innovation and entrepreneurship is I wasn't smart enough earlier in my career to know that I could aggressively build relationships that would promote my career. That if I actually met people and asked them for things and offered them things, that would be a nice situation. And it wasn't until I was running a female sexual health company, and when you do that, you hear from lots of women all the time, that I understood the power of that networker. I thought networking was, well, I have sort of an outgoing personality, and I make friends easily, and I'm going to work hard, and people are going to like me, and that's how I'm going to be successful. And I think that works to a certain level in an organization. And then there are lots of other factors that come into play. So going back to the original question, it's hard. Women don't always have the confidence. If you look at the businesses that women start, they tend to be softer businesses, and that's a generalization. Women tend to like companies that show profitability. They like to start smaller. They like to grow more slowly. And yet, you look at these companies. I remember my son was young when a couple years ago when one of the huge companies went public, and I said, my company has more profit than Twitter when they went public. He says, how could that be? I said, because it's a different set of value. And for me, when I look at building a company, I actually want to, I'm not suggesting Twitter's a great company, don't get me wrong. I'm not buying it. My company's not bigger than Twitter. But just the expectations I think that women have in general is it's much more methodical. It's much more bottom line driven. And I think we tend to, or we used to tend to, play by the rules. So for me, when I stopped playing by the rules, I think was when I really came into my own as an entrepreneur. So in 2008, when Iceland was falling apart, I was raising money for a female sexual health company. I had been running a services company successfully for 15 years, but when I went into the Silicon Valley offices, I was apparently a first-time entrepreneur because I had never run a product company. And the product, the asset that I was trying to buy still exists, and it's something that I didn't invent, but I'm very proud to have become introduced to, is a product that improved arousal, desire, and satisfaction for women of all ages and life stages. And we could, usually there are a lot of follow-up questions after that, but we'll say, so I walk into 11 offices, I have 13 meetings in 2 days to raise money with my longtime business partner. We had a good track record, we came from established companies, we had a venture capitalist introducing us, and I'm in Silicon Valley. I went to Stanford Business School, so there's not one meeting that I'm in where they don't know somebody that I know personally and professionally. So I think, how hard could this be? Then you add that it's 2008, the financial bottom is falling apart, and I'm in asking for money for a business about vaginas. As you might imagine, that wasn't the easiest conversation for people to have. And when you ask how people deal with it or how entrepreneurs deal with it, for me, my default has always been humor is the best way to deal with most situations. And in this situation, I found that it was very valuable. And so going back to Kimberly's question, why it's hard? Because the answer is never apparent. You have all kinds of problems that you wouldn't anticipate. We won't even get into the work-family balance and what happens when you throw a family into it. And you know, all these articles I read about how fabulous entrepreneurship is for a balanced life. I want to know what companies those people are starting. Because while you have a sense of control, not control, I won't even say control, a sense of ownership, in my experience, I never worked as hard in my whole life as when I was starting this company. And I had 2 young kids at the time. So anyway, to cut to the chase, part of it is figuring out, as a woman, how to connect with your audience. And I think this is true for most business owners, but I think it's even more common for women. Because men don't often come out of a room, a bathroom, and say, we don't do this. I wonder if any man in the room has ever experienced this. So I go into these meetings, and I've told Kimberly this story, and the men are asking me very specific questions about the science, and I'm giving very specific answers about the stratum corneum of the penis and the circulatory system, and their eyes are glazing over, as yours might, or maybe out of fear that I might go even into more detail. And after the third one, I said, this isn't working. This is a great story, and I'm not getting anybody's attention. So I walk into the fourth one, because I figure I have 2 days, I got to get this right. The first 3 were a total and unmitigated disaster. I walk in with my business partner, who I'm more extroverted than, which I'm more extroverted than most people I meet, so I'm not sure that's saying that much. And I go in with a $100 bill, and I say, here's a $100 bill. I'm going to put this on the table. If anyone says a double entendre that I haven't heard before, or a sexual innuendo that makes me blush, or anything that makes me uncomfortable, this $100 is yours. She likes it more, she wants to have it more, let's talk about the business model. Now, is that particular to a woman? I would say the challenges of being in that situation, being what they saw as first-time entrepreneurs, as a woman talking about female sexual health, was about as challenging a situation as I've ever been in. But if I were to give one piece of advice about what women can do, is find other women who are really smart and have done really hard things really well, like all the women on this panel that I've been lucky enough to get to know, and ask them for advice. Ask them for opinions. Say, how did you handle this? I do a lot of consulting, and our model is, let's figure out how someone else did this and copy it. It worked before. So I always start with existing models. So for me, to be able to call a Melissa or a Kimberly to say, what do you think of this, is incredibly valuable. So don't forget to build your network. Don't be afraid to ask. And it's unlikely going to work the first half a dozen times. So if you don't have endurance, then you're picking the wrong field.
You you alluded to this, Rachel, and I wanted to expand just a little bit, so I'm going to take a minute. There, about 5% of the venture funding now, 5% goes to women. And it's partly because many of, entrepreneurship is about identifying a problem or a need and finding a solution, building a solution that people will pay money for. And a lot of the needs that women identify come out of our own lives. That's where problems come from. And our familiarity with those comes from our lives that doesn't always resonate with the very homogeneous group of venture capitalists. They are typically almost exclusively white males. And so it isn't unusual to see that they don't quite, the problems and needs that women entrepreneurs bring to them doesn't always resonate as their priority. But I want to leave on an upbeat note on this topic. I am very encouraged and now active in the new funding mechanisms that are happening for entrepreneurship. Venture capital is being democratized now. Technology is helping to do that, but also a lot of angel and friends and family, but angel groups are the source of a lot of funding, and many, many of them are very receptive. There is an economic power to solving problems of half the world. So I want to leave you with that encouraging note. Back to challenges, and I want to turn again to Melissa, if I could, and then Rachel, if you could give us a specific situation in which you faced a tough challenge, like running out of money or having a management struggle. How did you recover from that and live to fight another day?
That's probably the toughest question, because we have faced every challenge you could imagine, and every day there are probably 10 more, so I could talk forever about that. But I think right at the beginning of our company, we faced what was a seemingly insurmountable challenge, which was we had our first product, which was a puzzle that we called a fuzzy puzzle, and we had our prototype in hand and needed to get it manufactured, and went to a whole bunch of factories. We said we want to make it in the US. Went to a whole bunch of wooden factories with this great product. We said we're going to buy a lot. We're going to buy like 10,000 of them. Will you make it for us? And every single one of them said the same thing. Oh my gosh, too much labor, not interested at all. And this was all in New England wooden factories. So we were in a conundrum. We said we have this great product. We don't know how to make it. What should we do? So we looked in the back of our trade journal called Playthings Magazine, and there was a little tiny ad that said, want to make a product, cost effectively? Contact me. And he was in California, it turned out. We're Jewish, a nice Jewish guy. And he basically his wife was Taiwanese and owned, he said, a factory which leads to the story, in Taiwan, and he would make our product for us. So he came to our New York area, met with us. We loved him. It was like instant chemistry. He took our product, like our child, and brought it to this factory to manufacture it. And we started manufacturing it to what was pretty good success. We were manufacturing for about a little under a year. Things were going well, great relationship, good rapport. In fact, it was selling well, and he started to give us some business advice, this older gentleman. I think you really should sell to Toys R Us. I think you should go mass market with this. And we said, we're really into the smaller stores, the specialty stores. Thank you, but it's our product, and we'll distribute it the way we want, but keep making it. So went to our first big trade show with this one product. Actually, there were two designs of the one fuzzy puzzle, and had our first booth. So excited, the two of us. Ready to start the show. The show starts, and a couple of our customers come running over, and they say, you're not going to believe this. They're out of breath. Someone has your exact puzzles 2 aisles down. We're like, what do you mean exact puzzles? Somebody has a booth, and it says, like, textured puzzles, not fuzzy puzzles, but they look just like yours. And of course, we were like, what? This is our baby. So Doug runs 2 aisles down. It turns out this manufacturer of ours, this mentor grandfatherly type had decided, because we didn't want to sell to the mass, that he would copy our designs and sell them ourselves. So we were devastated. We had stars in our eyes. We were young kids. We believed that everything was upstanding and moral in the world. And we saw this and we said, we have no manufacturer. That's it. We're done. This guy copied us. You know, we don't even want to be in the industry. The industry's unscrupulous. This is just horrible. So we decided we were going to quit. And we actually applied to graduate school. We're going to wind down our business. My husband was going to go for higher ed. I was going to get a graduate degree in writing, poetry, and we basically got an apartment for free. He was going to be an RA, so we really were going to downscale our lives and sort of move on to new careers. But interestingly, as we were selling the remaining stock of our puzzles, we were starting to get some really good press on this particular product. We were starting to get a lot of phone calls from end users, because we had our 800 number on the back, people saying, you know, we really love this product. We want to get more. Where can we find more? And I mean, like, for us, like 3-4 calls a day, which was like, oh my gosh. And then one day, but we were still, whatever, people want our product, but you know what, we have a better calling. But one day, we're in our little tiny office and the phone rings, and it's a voice with a very thick accent saying, hello, you know, do you make the puzzles? And Doug says, yes, we make the puzzles. So it turns out that it was our factory owner, who was actually not the wife of this gentleman, but our factory owner had tracked us down, because on the bill of lading there was our location. And he called us and said, why don't you order puzzles anymore? And we said, well, we are finished, sorry, you know, we're going out of it. He said, why not? I can make you puzzles. And we said, no, we're in Connecticut, you're in Taiwan, we can't afford to go there. He said, no, it's easy. Trust me, you know, you just place an order over the phone, I make puzzles, I send it to you, then you pay me. You don't even have to pay before the order ships. We said, really? And Doug, of course, my husband, always the negotiator, says, well, actually, we didn't like the price either. And he said, really? You don't like the price? I'll give you a better price. He said, okay, how about, and he said about 2/3 of what we were paying. And the gentleman said, hesitated for about 5 seconds and said, okay, fine. So we took his information, of course, hung up the phone, and we both looked at each other and said, this has to be a sign. And we canceled our, acceptances to grad school, and we decided, and I guess the lesson in that, is we could have gone direct. We were so scared of sort of that, and now the world is a lot smaller. This was, 24 or 5 years ago. But we went through someone we believed we could trust who was American and in California and seemed to come from our background. And he, ironically, was the one who knocked us off. We ended up going direct to this factory and working with them for about 15 years until they went out of business. So, and it was the smoothest, best relationship ever. So.
Fabulous. Rachel?
So I never thought I would have a product that lots of people wanted that I couldn't talk about. So our particular challenge, no, I don't mean that I couldn't, that we would go to, for those of you who have ever worked in advertising, there's a process at the networks and the cable stations called standards and practices. And basically you submit your ad, and some guy who's been working there 25 years, and it is a guy, which is relevant in this case, will say this is appropriate for TV or this isn't appropriate for TV. In the old days, you could just present a storyboard. Here's what it's going to look like. Now you have to say, here's my produced commercial. Do you accept it? So it's a much bigger investment. So I was going through the process, which normally is done by a third party, submitting our ads. No one was taking our ads. Now, they were very professional, they were very appropriate, we didn't show anything really sexual at all, there was no mention of body parts, people weren't laying down. When you see right now a perfume commercial, there's way more going on than was going on in our ad. We had a talking head talking about the situation. And so week after week, month after month, we kept getting these rejections. We won't take your ads. So finally, I said to the media company, can I talk to these people in these offices? I don't understand. I see ads. at 5 p.m. on CBS for Viagra during the Super Bowl, but I can't run an ad about female sexual health at 8:30 p.m. on Lifetime? Like, who's watching that? 35-year-old women, that's who I want to be talking to, not 10-year-old boys. So literally meeting after meeting after meeting, and one of the things I'll say about being an entrepreneur that has helped is you really do have to be very pig-headed, and you really have to have an ability to bang your head against the same wall over and over again, and when that doesn't work, just find a new wall, but you're still banging your head against something. So for months, I would do this. We had it with websites, we had it with radio stations, we had it with cable networks, we tried different strategies, we brought in a legal guy who this was his expertise, we made our ads look like the J&J KY jelly ads, we took out all the language, and we were winding up advertising a product where you couldn't say sex, sexual, sexuality, or arousal for a sexual arousal product. We could have been selling toilet paper. That's how clear the ad was. And I finally had to accept, much to my dismay, that I wasn't going to be able to change City Hall. This was too entrenched. There was too much money behind the larger companies, and they weren't going to take a risk on a smaller company that they hadn't heard of. Whereas J&J, if they wanted to say more blatant sexual messages with their KY product, we're going to take those because they spend, I don't know, $3 billion a year on our stations. And, this isn't worth it to have our cable stations call and complain. So what probably the hardest thing was accepting that I wasn't going to win, that I had done everything I could, used every trick that I had, called everyone I knew, had as many meetings as I could, and I wasn't going to break this. So what I did, because I thought this was insurmountable, and how are we going to do this? We have money to give away for ads, and no one would take it. I've never seen that in any business I've ever been in. So what I decided to do is I said, let's make this a PR story. Let's make this fact that we can't get people to take our money for advertising. Let's make that the story. So I kept going to PR firms, and I said, what do you think? Oh, Rachel, it's not a story. It's ridiculous. It's not a story. Second PR firm, Rachel, it's not a story. Then I met a woman socially who turned out was in PR, and I wasn't even working with her at the time, and we had an immediate connection, which turned out to have a better ending than the guy that you met in California. And I'm describing this to her, and she says, Rachel, that's a story. And it took me a year and a half from the time that I came up, well, when I started to try to get these ads on TV, until this story came out. And the way it progressed was it came out on a Tuesday in the New York Times. On Wednesday and Thursday, their product was featured on The View and Good Morning America. The following Tuesday, my business partner and I did an 8-minute interview on Nightline. That was cool. And we literally sat by our computers and watched how the PR had this enormous effect. And not in every business is it so immediate, but we could see we're on Nightline. We're not famous. We are watching 50,000 people come to our website and we're a small company at this point, as people are seeing the story. And what it turned out to be with the story was an 8-minute ad, essentially. So the reporter would say, well, what did you think would be the hardest thing about running this business? And I said at the time, I thought the hardest thing was going to be telling my kids what I did for a living. They subsequently both changed schools when we bought the company, so I don't know if that's related. And the reporter said, did you ever think it was this? And we said, we never thought that we'd have a product, and then we go into we had a product that was safe and clinically tested and hormone-free and glycerin-free and paraben-free that works for 70% of women, regardless of age or life stage, that we wouldn't be able to talk about. And so what happened was literally a solid year of PR in every major newspaper around the country, tons of media, and that really propelled the business for an entire year. Now, it wasn't all smooth sailing because ultimately, it's very difficult to build a business without getting a complicated message out. But we were able to get over that hump, generate enough interest, generate enough distribution that we could live to fight another day. We never resolved the advertising struggle. People came back and said, did you change anything? I said, do you mean did ABC now change their policy and they're willing to take my ads? And I had to hold my head in shame and say, no, they didn't. But at least people now know it's a story. And that's when this journalist who launched this all called me a entrepreneur, which has stuck over the past many years. But it is hard to pick yourself up. When you're on the other side of it, you say, why didn't I think of that? But it is really disheartening when you're in the middle of something and you really think you have a story and you really think you have a position and you conduct yourself with a moral integrity and people are not responding in kind. It really takes something out of you. So at the other end, it feels pretty good, but it's a long haul sometimes.
I'm often asked by Duke students in particular, who are very, very used to, and UNC students as well, really used to a lot of success. They know what it takes to get into UNC or Duke, and they have great resumes. What they don't know is the failure, and how do you pick yourself back up. So these are incredible stories, and I'm hearing across the table a theme of persistence and dogged enthusiasm and passion. We have come up with a couple of other topics. We're prepared to talk to you about what's changed over the last decade for women. I think that's a really good story Christy can speak to, where we have ideas about courses and mentorship and coaching that might be of help to you. Tatiana and Kathy are prepared to talk about that, but I'm going to make an executive decision because we have about half an hour, and I really want to open this up to you. I know some of you in this audience, and you have the passion and persistence and intelligence to become entrepreneurs. I would love to hear your questions or your stories. And I guess the way we'll do this is why don't you come up here, if you don't mind, standing, and I'll hand you this microphone. And try not to fall off the stage.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for sharing your stories. Those are truly inspiring. So my question is, over the summer, a few friends and I just started a new nonprofit at Duke University. We're Harmonies for Health, and we basically bring interactive musical services to children and elders who are combating with solitude or illness. And it's been, so we launched our set of services, including an instrumental program, instrumental exploration program, and interactive performances at the Ronald McDonald House. It's been 4 weeks, and people have been loving it. It's, the positive energy we've been receiving from patients have been amazing. And as you've just mentioned, to be an entrepreneur, you need to be big-headed in a way. So we're quite big-headed, and my exec board wants to, we have the goal of expanding to 7 more locations in NC in the next 2 years. So the current challenge we're facing right now is that all of us are full-time students, and in order to find people who are on the same page with us and who truly understand our vision, our core values, it's going to take a lot of searching, and in order to expand to other locations, which we are completely unfamiliar about, we just wonder what would be a good way of finding people to get them on board with us, and also to ensure their chapters of our organization will not only sustain our value, but also add their own creativity and interest to it.
I'll start. First of all, I love your passion. I can see the energy coming out, and that's wonderful, and so that means you'll be successful. One idea I would have immediately is there a way to partner with the National Ronald McDonald Organization, as opposed to just sort of one at a time to talk to the leaders of that organization and sort of be in all of the Ronald McDonald houses around the United States, for example. And I would ask you kind of who's on your board of directors. Do you really have a board that can make connections for you? Because one of the most important things about a board of directors beyond investors is people that are good connectors and might know a lot of other people that could bring that to the table. And you may have to hire a CEO, if you're all students, somebody that has experience in a nonprofit. But I would tell you this, don't give up. I'm on the National Cystic Fibrosis Foundation board, and that was founded about 30 years ago when children died when they were 4 or 5 years old okay? Today, their lifespan is 41 years old. That was started by a handful of parents, just a couple parents who said, we're not going to accept that our children are going to die before they're 12, okay? And it is now the chronic disease foundation by which everybody else models and emulates. We are sitting on $500 million right now of money that can be distributed back into research, and it was all done with just a handful of people. So you can do it.
Thank you.
Don't go yet. We have another answer from Melissa.
I'm going to come at it a little differently. I mean, I would say, to be honest, if you don't have the time and resources to grow, and you also believe it's going to be a tough hire to find people as passionate as you, I would say focus on your one location and hone it for much, much longer. And really, until you guys can yourselves really start the expansion and do it that way. You know, I'm a firm believer, and you have to be so good and so at what you do and know it so well and know everything, and you've just done it for 4 weeks, right?
Oh, well, it's been in planning since March, but still. Actually, it's been a month.
So, I mean, in my humble opinion,
Yeah,
I think you should be
absolutely.
doing it for a long, long time and working out every single kink so that you really, when you do expand, that you have a blueprint for success no matter where you go. And also a firmer understanding of exactly what qualities it takes in a person you're going to hire.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'd like to invite the next person up here, and a couple can come up front. I'm going to ask you to say your name and anything you want to tell us about yourself, and face the audience. We can hear you, but I want them to see your fabulous face.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jane Cooper. I'm a second-year PhD student in environmental engineering. My research focuses on trying to track sources of contamination from the oil industry, coal industry, et cetera. And I've done a lot of field work this past summer out in the Alberta oil sands. And just from being a woman in science, and then also just asking your opinion on this, is just, I found it really difficult to assert myself as someone whose voice you can trust and leadership you can trust as being a young female in an oil field. You know, like, I'm half everyone's size, have a smiley face, and I'm friendly, and it was really hard for me to, I don't know, have them get behind me. They were questioning me a lot, and I just kind of was asking your advice as to, like, how you put your first impressions forward and how you still can keep your personality, but also, you know, show your strength and your intelligence and your leadership skills.
Okay, so I'm going to answer this kind of with a story. And I think it's perfect because I don't know which one of these factors influences how people react to me, whether it's being a female, whether it's being an entrepreneur, or whether it's because I'm so young and therefore very inexperienced. But I'm going to start by saying, as you've experienced, a lot of times people like us, for, you know, however you want to describe that, smiley, you know, preppy women, whatever, are often underestimated. There's a great book by Malcolm Gladwell about underdogs and how they're actually not really underdogs. And when you look at what prepares them, they are actually the ones that are more likely to win the fight. He gives a great example at the beginning of David and Goliath. So because we're underestimated a lot of times, sometimes people don't come into the meetings prepared, or as prepared as they probably should be. So my story is about March. This past year, I was talking to my first distributor. My business was entirely based on offices at that point, and I knew I couldn't grow the business delivering kegs and cans of product in my two-door Toyota Yaris anymore and grow the business. So one of my businesses, Epic Games, had asked me to please start distributing through Capital Coffee, a pretty large office distributor in the Carolinas. So finally, after 6 months of Epic Games asking them to start carrying Mati and them telling me, you got to start getting with Capital Coffee, they finally started talking to me. I go into the meeting and I knew a couple things. cases of water and cases of sodas, the distributor typically makes about $4 on those, which is 35% of the wholesale price. And that the standard in the industry for distributors is 30 to 35%. But 30 to 35% on energy drinks, that was too much for me. I could not afford that. But because my product is more expensive, I could actually distribute it. Or my offer was going to be, take $7 instead of your $4 to $5 and distribute my product instead. You'll make more money. And, at the end of the day, that's what's important. So I go into the meeting. They say we want 35%, which comes out to, whatever, $12 or something, $12, $13 per case. Absolutely astronomical. And I said, well, I know you're making $4 or $5 on the cases of the waters and sodas. I'm prepared to give you $7, which is significantly more money. At the end of the day, the bank doesn't count percentage signs, it counts dollars. So let's go at both ends and make money. And the guys came back and said, you know what, you're right. He didn't do the calculation that the $7 is 17% and half of the percentage signs that they were looking for. But he said yes, because it was a mutual benefit, and I had done my homework, and I had figured out what I needed to be able to get to make a profitable partnership with them, and what they needed on their end to be able to still make money as well. And it turned out to be a pretty good partnership. So at the end of the day, if you're young, if you're a woman, if you're in any way underestimated or in a position where people don't take you seriously, you really have to beef up and be as credible as possible, know your information as well as you possibly can, and convey that with confidence and seriousness. And then people will respect you all the more for it, and you'll just be, a dime a dozen.
Kathy? Yeah, if I could add just a little bit to this. When I was in business school, I actually worked for my summer internship in a paper mill because I thought I wanted to be a financial analyst in the high-tech industry. And I was the only woman working in the main office. And we measured success in this paper mill by how many days we could go without someone dying. So it was a real rough and tumble atmosphere. And no one took me seriously. I was just a joke. And this is where I learned that men can be fabulous mentors. We've talked about women being mentors, but men can be fabulous mentors as well. I went to my boss and I said, you obviously hired me for a reason and I'm not being effective. And I said, you need to tell me what it will take to get their confidence. And he said, Kathy, I walk the mill every single day and I talk to everyone. And he said, they don't trust any of us who work in the central office because we're not putting our lives at risk the way they are. And he said, get yourself some safety shoes, get yourself a hard hat, and be out there every single day. And it really did make a huge difference. There were times, in all honesty, when I was a little bit overwhelmed by the things people would ask me, and it took being able to get around the fear that women sometimes have of, okay, I'm going to put myself in a situation where a guy is clearly testing me to see if I'll be tough enough. But once he saw that, yeah, I was back every single day, it really turned things around.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ivana Dumanyan. I am an undergrad here in engineering. I'm currently facing some challenges as I am trying to start up a product-based company. Our product focuses on a pretty, unfortunately for us, unfortunately for the industry, a disruptive technology to the industry of orthotics and wearable sensors both. I'm familiar with the barriers that are faced by female entrepreneurs, female business women, female anything. I worked for a construction company as a manager on site for several years. And I never thought that I'd find challenges harder than that, but I was wrong. We face quite a few barriers to entry in any market and any business. The one that I'm struggling with now is the information barrier. Our product brings together a lot of programming, a lot of design, a lot of sensor technology. I have a mechanical engineering background, but I am only a junior. And I'm trying to tap into those resources, those minds who can help me bring it together. But I'm at a loss. I keep hitting walls. I keep hitting dead ends. And even though it seems like I've built a good network, I'm asking all the right questions, I feel still lost, and I feel like I'm coming in short. how do I overcome those barriers, and especially the barrier of experience.
So I have a follow-up question to make sure I'm actually answering your question. So when you say you keep running into barriers, you mean you're trying to reach specific people, you're trying to build specific relationships and being unsuccessful?
I'm trying to reach individuals who have particular expertise in areas of sensor development or areas of orthotic innovation.
And you reach out to them and you're getting nowhere?
Nowhere.
There are a couple sort of old school tricks. Kathy talked about a few. Great idea to cozy up to the person who answers the phone. Great idea to send a creative package. Great idea to do anything that separates you from the 1,000 emails these people get every day. And one of the things I would say, and I just watching your body language, you have to, even if you don't feel encouraged, you have to go in like, you know, I'm the man, for lack of a better expression. Like, I've got this stuff together, because I think people smell fear and discouragement, and you don't want to present that. So I'm going to tell a story that I grew up, I'm one of 2 girls, and we were pretty athletic, and we watched all the sports training movie, any movie about a come from behind victory, we watched it. And you could test me on that later. So our family, the one that has resonated with me and has helped me in situations like this, because you will get there. If you do not give up, you will reach these people. So you have to believe that. I don't necessarily know if you know how yet, but you will, because it's too important not to. You can't move forward, apparently, without these people. So if it means finding out, I'm not saying stalk where their kids go to school, but finding out something personal that you might have in common with them, or understanding what they do in their free time, showing up at the Starbucks. I'm not averse to anything like, personally, I think you want to get this person's attention, and if you work at it long enough, that will be impressive. So the movie that we always quote in my family is James Caan, who's none of you would know who are under the age of 40, was in this movie in 1976 called Rollerball. And the concept of rollerball was a futuristic sport. And basically men with gloves with points on them and roller skates, you basically skated around in this very violent roller derby. And the way you won the game is when everybody else on the other team was dead. So we didn't know that this was sort of a gruesome thing to watch when we were 13. But the reason I mention this is because every time before every match, when you knew, not real like paper bills, but that you were facing death for this chosen career of being a sport, the coach would say, no timeouts, no substitutions. Meaning no one's coming in to take your place, there's no one to pass the ball to, no one else is going to do a better job at getting to these people. So if you really believe, and I don't mean it to be loosey-goosey because I really do believe this, if you stand here and say, I am going to get to these people no matter what it takes, as long as it's not illegal or unethical, then you will do it. And so what if it takes you twice as long as you thought it would? You will do it, because this is important to the growth of your business. So it's an old adage, but never, never give up on something that's really important to building the space that you're in.
So I have a little tactical approach to this. I fully support everything Rachel just said, but I'd like to suggest that you leverage a huge asset you have, and that is you're a Duke student, and the Duke network of alumni, it will really help. And there are, I think through the innovation and entrepreneurship, through alumni affairs, you need to seek out the resources that will open doors to Duke alums that are in your field. And tell them, start with, I'm a Duke student and I'm going to build the next great company. Will you help me?
And I'll go one step further, as I know someone who just came out of the Duke MBA program who worked for Medtronics and understands medical devices, and he works with us, and he's a very nice guy. And I will ask him to meet you. Okay?
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So I just wanted to say it's incredible to see all of you up here. It's often been said you can't be what you can't see. And so I love that Duke has put this on such a prominent day. It's on a Friday. It's at the Duke It's fabulous. And it's been, introduce myself. I'm Kara Peterson. I'm a public policy, women's studies double major undergrad. I'm a senior. It was fascinating hearing a lot of you tell your stories about things that needed to change for you to be able to be up here and hold the positions that you have. Do you have any insights into what might need to change so that we can see more women of color being able to sit in the same position that you find yourself in today?
Well, I will say in the biotechnology industry, we're doing a number of things. We have a local group here called Women in Bio. We are definitely trying to attract more people that have ethnic diversity. If you look at the North Carolina School of Science and Mathematics, about 51 or 52% are female, and there's a lot of ethnic diversity, and they try to do as much of that as they can. But I think they need role models too, and so we have a few in the area, not nearly as many as we need, but the same has been true of males versus females. You need some role models, you need some success, and they need to help other people see that it's doable, right? That be brave and go into this opportunity and not be afraid that you're not capable. So I think it will happen over time. I don't know if anybody else has any.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think it's an excellent question, and kudos to you for asking it and raising it here. I am a founder of an organization called SOAR, and it's an organization that is helping women in this region, the Research Triangle Park area, launch successful businesses. Actually, Tatiana is one of our female entrepreneurs that we're helping. And this is funded by Google. They didn't give us a heck of a lot of money, but they gave us a lot of publicity. And leveraging the Google brand has really made this successful. The next venture they are taking on is, for right now they're focused on women, and they're next, in the next few months, focused on women and greater diversity, people of color. So the reason I mention that is, first of all, there's a solid initiative happening, much like Christy mentioned. But secondly, I think it's widely recognized by leaders across America that we need more inclusion, and that people of all different backgrounds and perspectives and races and genders need to have solutions to their problems. And there's business in it. It's a bottom line issue. So I'm very encouraged that this is going to change, and it's going to change in the near future.
Thank you.
So my other half is actually Venezuelan. I'm a Venezuelan citizen as well as a U.S. citizen. I just happened to be born here so that I could benefit from being a U.S. citizen. I didn't start learning English until I was 7. When I moved to the U.S., I grew up speaking Spanish and Icelandic at home, and to this day, that's what my parents speak to me in their respective languages. I came out looking very white, very Scandinavian, except for I got brown hair and brown eyes from my mom. I think that on a very personal level, it really, both being a minority and by being a woman entrepreneur, you can't let yourself have excuses. You can't look around and say, I don't see very many Hispanic women starting companies in the food beverage industry. You know, my role models are Seth Goldman and Mark Rampala, who started Honest Tea and Zico coconut water and then sold it to Coca-Cola, making huge companies that create great consumer products for people. I'm not looking for only a woman entrepreneur as an example, and I can't let that be a holding point for me. So I'm going to answer your question on a personal level. To any of you guys, ladies or guys, minorities, you know, whatever, if you have any doubts in your mind, you need to wipe them out of your head and be big-headed. You have to write down everything that you've ever done that you're impressed or that somebody else is impressed by you about and read it over before every meeting you go to. And eventually, you'll have had enough meetings and made enough progress that has turned into real confidence and real ability that you've developed. And that's how you start getting somewhere. So that's how I'm going to answer that question. I don't know what we can do on a national level. I'm not, important or enough to have had that experience yet. But that's my experience as a one-person, one-woman show.
That was a beautiful answer. Thank you very much.
We have time for one more question, and we need to keep our comments brief because we want to respect your time.
Hello, I'm Grace. I'm a public policy and neuroscience double major. I'm a sophomore at Duke. So my question is about this sort of tipping point that you guys have been describing. Like you're working really hard and then something happens, you get some connection that really accelerates your movement. How can we make that happen faster? Like what skill do we need? What are we not doing?
Tenacity, and you keep going, and it does take time. Short and brief, Kimberly?
I like it. Others?
I would, I'm sorry. I would also say learn as much as you can right now. Take advantage of the wealth of resources here, because I learned so much trying my entrepreneurship venture that if I'd learned it when I was in school, I would have gotten to my tipping point much, much faster.
And I would just say, again, connections are key, and you have so many with Duke and the Duke Alumni Network. Use it.
And I would say know your business, know your numbers, always be prepared so that when opportunity knocks or you create the knocking, that you are prepared. There's very little luck involved in how prepared you can be. So every time you're in front of someone, you need, Melissa made this point very eloquently, you have to know your business, you have to be prepared, and you have to take a long-range view. So to me, the objective isn't speed, although it's very frustrating and it's difficult to be patient. The issue is always being prepared so that when you get to the right connection, you have the goods.
I guess to end, I mean, I would say having a senior at Duke as a son and other children too, kids today, oh gosh, I never thought I'd say that. Wow.
They love that rock and roll stuff.
You know, I always say it's not a marathon, it's a journey. I'm sorry, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And I always say that to them, and that's probably the thing after 26 years doing this. I don't think you should be thinking about what you can do to accelerate it. I think you should be thinking about making your idea or whatever you're doing the best it can humanly be, and really working to just build that, and then it will all come. But if you try to rush it, you might deny yourself some of the learnings that will make it the greatest it can be.
Thank you.
So I need to bring this to a close, and I want to thank the panel so much for having incredible stories and advice and inspiration. I want to thank Eric Toon for making sure that this, and your team, Eric, this got, alluding to the earlier comment, this got prime time. This was an invitation only. They had to turn people away. I think it speaks to the demand and the commitment from Duke to do this. So, and I want to lastly thank all of you. I know how busy life is. Thank you for being here.
I know she's bringing this to an end, but as you see, I am definitely not of the vintage of all these young ladies up here. And Tatiana is right. You have to build on your successes. I'm not a Duke graduate. My husband is. I get emotional about this because in 1957, Duke was not integrated. 25% of the women, student body was only women. So you cannot, you've got to build on your successes. You've got to realize where you are and whose shoulders you're standing on. Good luck.
Thank you. Again, thank all of you for coming and caring about this. Go start something.